Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
Conor McGregor is set to return versus Cowboy Cerrone. So Donald Cerrone, it is expected to be a welterweight fight, so that's up at 170. And just to give you a little bit of history, Cowboy's done a few fights at 170 and 155, which is lightweight. McGregor, though, back when he won his first belt in the UFC, it was all the way down at 145. So he's fighting featherweight. Then he bumped up to lightweight, which he was able to win that belt. Then he left and did stuff with Floyd Mayweather and, some of the Diaz fights, all that stuff. And so now McGregor apparently is expected to bump up to 170 to fight Cowboy Cerrone.
You know, it's just good that we finally know what's going on with Conor, because out of all the speculation that we've had in like our past discussions when it's come to Conor, it's like, where is he fighting, who's he's fighting, what's going to happen. It's finally good to have a like resolute answer in the fact that he's facing Cowboy. And like we kind of saw this fight coming, because I feel like we've mentioned that match as a possibility the last few shows. I heard like Chael Sonnen say basically it was like one of the worst kept secrets in the MMA community that these two were going to match up at some point. I mean, Conor's called him out on like Twitter from time to time here and there as well. And I'm glad to see Conor, and it's just amazing to see like what kind of weight he still carries like in the fight community. Because I mean, let's face it, I think Conor is up there as one of our most talked about athletes, and he hasn't even fought in the entire history of this show. And yet we still talk about him as one of the better fighters. And I guess we finally get a chance to see it, like see what has coming up for him. A lot of people are talking about this fight as a get-right fight for Conor, a chance for him to get his feet wet and get back into the sport. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm going to throw this out there. I feel like this is a potential retirement fight if he loses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to go one of two ways, and literally only one of two ways. It's not going to be anything in the middle. And like you're saying, it's if he wins, right, he gets to basically say, like, look, I bumped up 2 weight classes now, right? So not just 155. Now I've gone up to 170. I've got to win there. I'm a bad dude, right? Like, I still deserve to be basically the number one pay-per-view earner for UFC and MMA in general. I still deserve my title fights, and I still deserve to hold the spot as a main event holder. Or he loses, and then that's now 3 straight losses, I believe. He lost to Khabib and got humiliated by Khabib. He lost to Floyd Mayweather. Right before that, he had won against Nate Diaz, but then lost the fight before that to Nate Diaz, right? So if he loses another one, that's 3 losses in a row. Of course, one was in a boxing fight, but that's hard to basically maintain your legacy and try to say that you're still deserving of being the number one pay-per-view by being, on these main events, right? The main event hoster on the main card, stuff like that. I can't really justify it if you've lost 3 times in a row. So I think you're exactly right. It's either going to be this fight gets him another title shot, right? Or any shot that he wants to call out whoever, or it basically leads to his retirement.
I mean, Conor could have picked anyone. Conor still has that draw to where he could pick whoever he wants to fight except Khabib. Khabib's the only one that has more of a authority over him to say, no, I don't want that fight at this point. As far as this goes, I mean, we've seen this story before, and that's why I mention it. We saw with Ronda Rousey. After the Holly Holm knockout, everyone was hyping up her return. The UFC was hyping up her return. This is Ronda's back. She's healthy. We have a lot of faith that she's just going to jump back up to the top of the card. And then she runs into that buzzsaw they call Amanda Nunes, and she's done. She's retired. She's gone from the entire sport, becomes a WWE wrestler, and that's the end of her story with the UFC. Same thing could happen to Conor if he loses this fight. There is no way that he could recover from another loss, and especially to someone who's a little bit at the edge of his career as well, Donald Cerrone. So when it comes to him, he's coming off 2 straight losses. So if he broke his 2-loss streak against Conor, that's a terrible look. That's the type of loss you don't recover from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not to mention, is it just 2 straight losses? It's also 2 TKO losses. Now, granted, one was a doctor stoppage because of bleeding, right? And so the doctor stopped that, which is totally fine. We've talked a little bit about that before in some of the most recent fights, especially the Diaz one. But his other loss was the Justin Gaethje, who's another bad dude, right? And that was a legitimate sort of TKO loss, right? And to be able to come back from that and be able to beat Conor McGregor, that's not the best look for McGregor. Now, I do think that this is one of the more low-risk fights for him, right? Like you said, Cowboy's sort of getting towards the end of his career. He's not as good as he once was. Cowboy also stylistically isn't necessarily McGregor's kryptonite. I think we've seen the wrestlers like a Khabib, a really good grappler, can mess up Conor McGregor. Or even Chad Mendes, when Chad Mendes took the fight on a short notice, same thing. He was out wrestling Conor McGregor easily, and you could say he was basically winning that fight until he got gassed out, which you could argue was due to a short training camp. And so Cowboy has really good submissions, but he's not the typical guy, that can beat McGregor on the ground, because Cowboy doesn't have as good a wrestling as some of those other guys do, right, to be able to get McGregor to the ground. So I think it's a wise matchup for McGregor if you're going to take a fight of like, hey, here's somebody you could still sort of say is a top contender, will still draw people, right? Like Cowboy's not a complete fish that's just, a dead body for Conor to beat up on. But at the same time, like it could still be a very dangerous fight for McGregor.
Well, here's the key number here, 5. This is a 5-round scheduled fight. So for Conor, who's coming off this year of rest, year recovering from the broken hand, everything else. I know he's been training, but he hasn't been actively fighting, participating. And a big knock on Conor in past matches has been his stamina. If he doesn't TKO or KO Cerrone early, and he allows this fight to drag on into the later rounds, he might be in trouble with this one. This could be a dangerous fight for him in that regard. And a lot of people are questioning why would he put himself in that position to schedule a 5-round fight, knowing this is a possibility as well.
And that's the thing. And his Cowboy, he trains up at altitude. So a lot of people don't know, but Donald Cerrone, he lives here in Edgewood, New Mexico, right? He's from Colorado. So he's living up in the mountains. He's living, breathing high up at altitude. And he's constantly training, constantly doing something. The dude rides bulls. He's going snowboarding. Like, he's always active. So Cowboy can definitely last the full 5-rounder. How much success he's had in 5-round fights, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I don't think he's been like the most successful when it comes to winning those 5-round fights, but I know he has gotten to several decisions that have gone the full 5 rounds. Whereas you're right, McGregor, we know that he does not look good at the end of 5-round fights.
One of my favorite memes I've seen so far for this fight is basically, what is his whiskey called? Like something 12?
Oh, Proper 12.
Proper 12. They put a like photoshopped image of Proper 12, a Proper 12 bottle next to a Coors Light. And that's kind of like these two guys' personalities here. So I'm interested to see those two square off because of that.
Yeah. So what's funny is, how I know McGregor needed this fight and needed some money? As I actually started seeing him in commercials for Proper 12 whiskey. And that's how I was like, okay, this dude's running out of money. Like, he's got to do something to make some money now.
Well, it's funny that like Cerrone is like the spokesman for Coors Light. So I knew a guy in college, and it's kind of funny like to think back to him. This man had always had like a Keystone Light in like his back pocket. So like the ultimate like budget beer, Keystone Light, right? And it's weird because like he made money, right? He made money. He was a smart guy. He was engineering and everything like that. So like we finally saw him like outside of college. He's walking around with a case of like Coors Light, right? And he's like, "Hey, Landon, you don't have like the?" I just name dropped you. Oh, hey, Landon, you're gonna be on the show. Here.
Well, Landon,
anyway,
welcome to the Slumpbuster.
Hey, Landon, you don't have the Keystone Light today? It's like, no, man, I upgraded. He's got the Coors Light. Upgraded a full 50 cents there.
Hey, those are the guys that stay rich, though.
Those are, yeah. I mean, they know how to budget, obviously. All right. So So are we moving on from this topic? Are we still kind of like want to talk Conor, or do we want to see it in the octagon first?
Yeah. So real quick then, who do you got winning this fight?
I got to give Conor the return fight win. I think that if this year-long drought of not fighting doesn't motivate him to come in hot and just want to knock Cerrone out first round, I don't know what does. And I will say this. He seems like a hard worker because he's rich. He doesn't have to do these fights anymore. His reputation is what it is. I know it's been a little bit tainted, but I still think the history books would look kindly on Conor if he didn't fight this one match against Cerrone. So I think this is going to be his time to shine. Give me him, and if I were to make a prediction, 2nd round knockout.
Okay, that's not bad. I mean, I agree with you on a lot of points. I think McGregor needs sort of this comeback win. This is probably, like I said, the fight to make without making it seem like it's a total gimme fight to McGregor, right? Like, it's one of the easier of the top tier fighters. Not only that, but Cowboy, it just seems that he's very susceptible to body attacks. So a lot of times he's been, hit, whether it's with a hook, right, or a kick to, I'm not sure if it's his liver or his spleen, something that happens a lot of times when he gets hit to the body, that he just seems to curl up, and then from there can be TKO'd. And so I think Conor throws some very good side kicks that will make Cowboy possibly shrivel up, right? And that opens the opportunity for that TKO, like you're saying, in that 1st or 2nd round. That being said, I'm actually going to go with Cowboy on this one. My reasoning being is Cowboy's one, taller, right? So McGregor's used to fighting some of these shorter guys, right? So Jose Aldo or Chad Mendes, McGregor's just so much taller and longer than that, his reach and his kicks can come into play a little bit more. Whereas Cowboy's 6'1". Cowboy's also fought a lot bigger, so this will be the first time McGregor goes up to 170. And all of McGregor's losses are by submission. And so, like I said, Cowboy, even though he's not the wrestler, I don't know how good of a job he can do getting McGregor down to the ground. McGregor has good takedown defense if he's fighting just your typical fighter, right? Not a Khabib Nurmagomedov. But Cowboy does have 17 submissions, and so I think Cowboy just has a little bit more ways to win this fight. I think he just has more options. It could be a decision. It could be a submission. And Cowboy himself is a very good striker. So because of all that, I'm going to take Cowboy.